So, unlike a lot of other, sons and daughters of martial art figures, which a lot of time from my experience, they don't actually want to do martial art, right? I know so many teachers, they have to force their sons to train. And even then, the moment they grow old enough to defy their father, they will stop training and never look back. So unlike those cases, I'm actually the exact opposite. I really wanted to do martial art when I was a kid. So much so that I used to tell my dad all the time that I want to do martial art. But my dad, he does not want to teach me. So here you can see a picture of me. I think this was like 3 years old, and I was trying to mimic stuff that my dad was doing in front of me. And then here is a picture of me, I think 6 or 7 years old. I was trying to mimic a side kick. My dad actually didn't teach me that at all. I basically watched movies and then try to imitate what I see in movies. I think at the time I was watching Enter the Dragon from Bruce Lee. And then here is a photo of when my dad was actually in a good mood, and he was letting me punching his hand, and he wasn't actually teaching me properly either. So if you wonder why my dad don't want to teach me, it's because when I was a kid, I had a very short temper. I think I still do, a lot better now than before. But I had an even shorter temper back in the days, and I used to always get into fights when I was from nursery school to primary school in China. I used to always get in fights. Almost every day during our lunch break, I'll be punished to stand still in the teacher's office for an hour during the lunch period. I was not allowed to eat basically because I had gotten into a fight. I mean, there was even once where when I first went to the school as grade 1, there was a grade 7 kid or grade 6 kid, depending on how you count. He basically bullied me, and I couldn't beat him because obviously he was much bigger than me. Especially when you were younger, every year your physical ability differs quite a bit. And that's when I really wanted to do martial art, because I thought if I learn Chinese martial art, I'll be able to kick his ass. But obviously, I went to my dad, told him that, and he didn't. He obviously think it was a very bad idea. And because he didn't want to teach me, I actually, took one of his stone carving knives, like a knife that you carve stone seals with, right? You carve characters into the Chinese, like a stamp, right? Stone seal, where you stamp onto your calligraphy work. So I took one of those knives and I had it in my bag. I was trying to stab him the next day. And luckily, my mom actually was cleaning out my bag, and she discovered this knife. I got into a lot of punishments because of that, and that further affirmed my dad's decision to not teach me martial art, because he basically saying that if I learn martial art, I'm gonna basically go to school and severely hurt someone. And obviously in China, if you hurt somebody, you have to pay a lot of medical and legal fees, and was something that my dad obviously don't want to do. So he did not teach me at all until we came to South Africa. Now the reason we came to South Africa is because at the time there was a Taiwanese Buddhist association called Foguangshan. They were deciding to build a temple in South Africa. The abbot in charge of this whole project, Hui Li Fa Shi, he was a Kung Fu movie fan. So he wanted someone to teach his monks Chinese Kung Fu in his temple, right? So he even envisioned that it could be like a temple, like a Shaolin temple. So he wanted a martial art teacher that is also a devoted Buddhist. And then he went to China and he asked around. Eventually, a friend, introduced him to my dad. They came together. They sat down, talked about it. He really liked my dad. That's how he invited my dad, my mom, and me to immigrate to South Africa. And since we got here in '94, my dad started teaching Kung Fu classes for the temple. And naturally, I was allowed to join the group class. Firstly, because my dad knows that he will need an assistant instructor eventually, and obviously that role will fall onto my shoulders. But also because over here, there's a lot of bullying going on back in the old school days, and obviously he didn't want me to be bullied at school by white or black kids. So that's why he started allowing me to take part in his martial art classes. And obviously it will look quite weird if he's giving martial art classes but his own son is not allowed to participate. Right? That will kind of look weird among the community. So over here you see a picture of the first ever class my dad gave in South Africa. And and I'm the one towards the left in the blue suit, in the blue tracksuit. All right, and here is a picture of me doing a demonstration to promote Chinese martial arts, the temple, and Chinese culture in general during one of the Chinese festivals in South Africa. Right, I'm the one that's jumping up. We're doing like a 2-person fixed combat set. Here's a picture of me performing on stage in one of the Chinese community celebration. Timestamp on the 1996, so that I was basically about 14 years old. So since I was maybe 12, I already started to perform martial art forms in front of audience and on stage. Again, this doesn't make me a good martial artist. I'm just showing you that I've been doing this for a very long time. Right, here's a picture of me doing a tornado kick with a stick in one of the forms. I used to do a lot of contemporary trickery back in the day because those looks better for performances. And here's a picture of me performing Bai Yan Tong Bei. Right, this is Bai Yan Xiang Guo, one of the Bai Yan Tong Bei moves. In Stanton Square, which is one of the biggest shopping malls in Johannesburg, and this was for an event for the premiere of the original Disney cartoon Mulan. Right, for that premiere, they wanted a bunch of martial art people to help them promote the cartoon, and my father's school was basically asked to do martial art demos there. Alright, and not only did my father's school perform for Chinese communities and various celebrations and functions, we will also eventually gain a lot of recognition that we were doing performances for political functions. So for example, here is a picture taken with Tokyo Sequali, who at the time was the mayor of the Gauteng province. Right? That's one of the central provinces in South Africa. He was a mayor at the time, and this is taken after we did a martial art demo for him and his function, and he was very pleased with us and came to take a picture with us. And I heard that he is still a prominent political figure in the current political scene, but I don't really care about politics, so I don't really follow up on that. Right, here is a picture taken after a demo we did for another political function. Right, the taller black gentleman that's next to me, that's Mr. Balfour. He was at the time the Minister of Sport. And the one next to him, the shorter gentleman, he was at the time the head of the Olympic Committee in South Africa. I think that function was something to promote some Olympic event. I can't really remember anymore. The two people next to them were the head of the Chinese Martial Art Authority, which is like the government institute at the time. The government Chinese martial art, and obviously the one next to them is my dad. Here's a picture of me translating what Mr. Balfour was saying to my dad. Alright, and here is basically a group photo that we took after the demo on that day, which comprised of most of our students at the time. I just want to point out the ones that dressed in black, they are not my dad's students. They're from another school that's in close association and collaboration with my dad's school. But they are not our students, right? Everyone that's dressed in white and yellow pants, those are all our students at the time. And also take special note, the person on the far right, right next to my dad, the gentleman that's dressed in like a shirt, that's actually Master Zhang Yunchao. He's a very well-known 7-star Flying Mantis master, as well as a chain-star master from Shenyang, right? One of the major cities in the northeastern province. He learned 7-star Mantis from a very well-recognized grandmaster called Wang Qingzhai. The reason I'm putting him out here is because I don't have a picture of him. I don't have another picture of him, and at the time I did study 7-star Mantis from him, which I'll be mentioning at a later stage. And here is our school rehearsing for the 7th All African Games closing ceremony at the Johannesburg Stadium. And this is actually a picture that was used on the front page of the newspaper the day after the closing ceremony of the 7th All African Game. And obviously this features our school doing a dragon dance, right? That's my dad next to the dragon's head, leading the dragon. Well, here's a picture taken more recently when I was visiting Beijing and visiting my good friend Byron Jacob, right? Some of you probably know him as Wushu Tiger on YouTube. He also has a martial art channel called Mushin. And he does a lot of good documentaries on Chinese martial history. So for those of you that don't know, you should definitely check him out and subscribe to his video. So he originally started as a contemporary martial art practitioner in South Africa. Eventually, he became the Secretary General of the Wushu Federation, which is the government institute that governs Chinese martial art in South Africa. And we've been friends for many years. Eventually, he got more interested in traditional Chinese martial arts, so he relocated to Beijing and is currently studying Xingyi under a very recognized Xingyi master, Master Di Guoyong. And over there, he then got a job working for the International Wushu Federation. I heard recently he left that post, I'm not too sure. But during that time, he was also highly involved in the judging program and promoting Xingyi to other parts of the world and training international judges for the competitions, etc. So he's more involved in the official government-instituted martial arts scene than I do. And the reason I'm showing you all these photos, again, politicians don't make great martial artists. knowing the people who work for the International Wushu Federation doesn't make me a good martial artist, right? Now this speaks to my credibility in terms of my skill. However, this shows you that I am not some random martial enthusiast who practice in my backyard, right? The school that my dad used to run was quite prominent within the South African community, not just the Chinese community, but overall, when it comes to Chinese martial arts, our school was one of the most recognized in South Africa at the time. Now, in case if you're wondering, if we have so many political and governmental connections, why don't I use that to get more students? Well, you see, the thing is, unlike my dad, who really enjoys socializing with people, I'm actually pretty antisocial, and also I can compromise in everything else in life, but I will never compromise in Chinese martial art because that's the one thing that I want to keep pure. What that means is I will never ask people to help me to get students. For me, if somebody respect my knowledge and want to learn from me, they're all welcome, and I don't hold back my knowledge. But I'll never go and tell somebody, hey, you know what, I got good martial art, you want to learn? I hate that, and I'll never do that. Which is why, even though we have a lot of political connections, I will never ever ask them for any help, right? Either someone likes what I do and they come to my class, or they can get the F out. I really don't care. Even though, if I don't have enough money, it doesn't matter. This is one area that I'll never ever compromise. And also, I respect those politicians, but I personally don't like politics and don't like to be mingling with politicians. Just one thing, there's another thing that I don't like to do. And as to, what happened to my dad's martial arts school, then I'll get to at a later stage in this video. Okay, so now that we've looked firstly at my dad's background in Chinese martial art community, as well as how his school was highly recognized within the South African community when it comes to Chinese martial art and Chinese culture, which basically speaks about my years of involvement in promoting Chinese martial arts in South Africa, right? It doesn't speak about my actual ability. So next, let's basically look at some actual qualifications. Okay, so now let's take a look at my actual qualifications. Now, before I start, I would like to say that in martial arts, qualifications or papers or medals or certificates actually means nothing. Okay, like my Wushu combat master always say, the only thing that matters in Chinese traditional martial art is if I lift my hand, they lift their hand, can I beat him? That's the only thing that matters, and the only thing that real Chinese martial artists respect. But anything else is void and null in the mind of a true Chinese traditional martial artist. So if that's what I believe, then why am I still going to show you my papers and medals and certificate, right? This is basically to avoid people think that I'm a sour grape, right? I say the grape is sour because I don't have it, I don't eat it. I'm going to show you what qualification I do have and then remind you that these means nothing. And so firstly, the most important one, as you can see here, is a certificate that's saying that I'm a 5th Dan and issued by the Chinese Wushu Federation, right? So Dan is basically a Chinese version of Dan, which they have in Japan. So it's a national instituted system that they govern Chinese martial art. I personally think this whole entire system is garbage and rubbish. Okay, but if you want to know my official qualification, here it is. It is 5th Dan, which isn't high and it isn't too low. I could have get 6 or 7, probably 6, maybe 7. I don't really know. I need to find out. But the reason that I didn't go further in this qualification system is because I think it's trash. Okay, it is stupid. I didn't like the experience I had when I got this certificate because I have to learn from someone. I have to call him teacher, someone that I don't think actually know what he's talking about. I have to learn a form that I think is not even the real form, and I have to pretend like it is good, and then go through an examination that I think is completely rubbish just to get this certificate. I really didn't like that experience, and most likely I will never go back again, which is why I didn't advance further in the system. And I could only get a 5th Dan at the time because I was relatively young. Right? These Dans are time gated by your age. You can't apply for a higher Dan if you're not old enough. So at the time, they say, "Oh, give me 5th Dan, and then I can come back a few years later to apply for 6 and so forth." But I most likely will never ever do that because I don't like the experience. Now here's a certificate that shows that I'm a national level Tai Chi instructor. So what this means is in the Chinese official system, if you go through a certain examination to become a government recognized instructor with this Tai Chi, long fist or whatever, and then you have I think there's 30 level, There's provincial level and national level. So national level is the highest level that you can get within this system of instructors certificate. And what this means is, I'm qualified to teach anywhere in China if there's any schools or institutes or wherever that requires a Tai Chi instructor. I will be qualified for the job if I have this certificate. But obviously, if they hire me or not, it depends on other reasons as well, especially who you know and what kind of relationship you have. But this certificate basically means that I can go anywhere in the country and teach Tai Chi, and I have one of the highest qualifications as a Tai Chi instructor. Again, this actually absolutely means nothing. Or it does mean something if you're trying to get a job, sure. And if some newbie, most uninformed people come and ask me, are you a master? I will tell them I'm not a master because I don't think I mastered a style. If you have a master style, you're not a master. But I do tell them I'm not a master, but I am a qualified instructor, and this is why I have this piece of paper. But in actuality, it means nothing, right? My Tai Chi master don't have a piece of paper like this, but he has 100 times more qualified and more knowledge in Tai Chi than me. And which is why, in traditional martial art community, we don't give a flying donkey about any of these kind of papers. But in case you are the type of people that judges a man's martial ability by papers, then here you go. Those are my papers. Alright, next, let's look at some of my competition results. So basically, starting from 1999 to the year 2005, I took part in every single South African national Chinese martial arts competition. As long as I was in South Africa, I wasn't somewhere else. I took part in all of them, and in every one of them, I've won gold medals, multiple gold medals, for various categories. Here you can see a couple of certificates. I don't keep all of them, so these are the ones I managed to dug out. I don't know where the rest are. There's a lot of them that I just throw them in cardboard boxes and then stash them somewhere in the corner of my house. My house is quite messy. Well, it's actually my mom's house now, so I don't know where they are. And I've never framed them, put them on the wall or anything because I find them to be pretentious. I don't want people to think that I actually value these certificates. I actually don't, which is why I just keep them stashed somewhere in cardboard boxes. I do have a lot more than what you can see here, but as I keep saying, they all means nothing in actuality of Chinese traditional martial arts. But if you ever wonder, have I won competitions? Well, here are the certificates. So yes, I have won competitions. And obviously, because of that, I was also selected to represent South Africa in the national martial art team from 1999 all the way to about 2005, I think. I can't remember exactly. So every time there is national trials, I'll go there, I'll win, I'll be selected part of the national team. Although we don't actually do much, but I was part of the national team at the time. And I still don't do much because South Africa was actually quite corrupted and they don't really have the funding to get us to go compete for South Africa in international tournaments. Which is why we get selected every year and we just sit on our hands and do nothing. And here you can see some pictures taken of me while I was doing various competitions. And here is a picture taken of me leading my team, right? My father's students in the martial school, and we're basically sitting down listening to the host talking about stuff during one of what they call an all-star tournament where you have like Chinese martial art, karate, and everyone's basically welcome. It's like a free-for-all competition. And here's a group photo taken after a national competition with me and my dad's students. And even though they are technically my dad's students, but ever since I was 13, I started to assist and instruct them. And then after I came back from China, which I'll get back at a later stage, I basically took over from my dad. And they're still my dad's student, but I take the day-to-day classes. My dad only supervise, but I basically teaches everything. So they're essentially my students, just not in name. And in this particular tournament, I think everyone on that photo, except I think 3 of them, right? Everyone minus 3 all won gold medals in their respective categories. Alright, here's a picture of me receiving my national colors, right? That blazer, me wearing that's a pro-tier blazer, is given to members of the national team, and the gentleman that was handing me the certificate, he was at the time the president of the Chinese Martial Authority under the National Sport Committee that governs Chinese martial art in South Africa. Alright, so up to this point, you might think, right, South Africa is a relatively small pond, there's nothing to win medals here, which is true. South Africa is a relatively small pond. And the majority of the competitors, that I compete against, are just hobbyists, and they haven't been training for a long time, and they don't have very highly qualified instructors like my dad, which is why myself as well as all my dad's students, we always win medals in this competition because we are just better trained than most of the other schools at the time. So that is true, Which is why next let's look at how I did in an international competition. In the year 2001, my dad and I was invited to participate in an international Chinese martial art tournament in Orlando, Florida, USA. It was held in one of the stadiums in Disney World. And here's a photo taken with my dad on the day at the event. And so in this tournament, unlike South Africa, nobody knows my dad, nobody knows me. So, some people might think that in South Africa, because my dad's a prominent figure, so maybe the judges give me score favorably. I don't think they do. Well, even if they do or don't, it don't really make a difference because I was just better trained than most of the other competitors at the time. But but in case that is a reasonable doubt, in this particular tournament, we don't know anybody there. We were given the invitation by a friend who was also invited the year before that. So he basically emailed the organization and they emailed us an invitation. We don't know anybody there at all. We don't know any of the judges, any of the organizing committee, no one. And in this tournament, I would manage to get 5 gold medals and 5 silver medals, which still doesn't actually make me a great martial artist. It just means I'm good at competition. And furthermore, right, I would say this, right, even these international competitions are not actually that high leveled. I would say the only competition that really matters if you have won a Chinese government instituted national wushu championship. Those are the real hardcore competitions. Or if you win, the Chinese national instituted standard tournament, those are also very hardcore. But any other competition, right, in Chinese martial art community, they are not really that to be taken seriously. Even in China, right, if you go and compete in the traditional Chinese martial art tournaments, they practically hand out medals for everyone, right, so that they can come back again next year. They want to keep everybody happy so that they can keep making money from them. And in some of the tournaments that some of my past teachers were associated with, from what I hear from them, basically, whoever gives the most sponsorship, their student would win first place. It's all decided before the tournament even starts. So don't take any competition seriously unless it is a national contemporary wushu tournament or national standard championship in China, right? Other than that, I think most of these Chinese traditional martial art tournaments are not to be taken seriously at all. I'm only showing these medals just to say that, again, I'm not being sour grape. I've been there, done that, but I don't think it is something that one should be really proud of. And even though, right, majority of people participating in this tournament are just hobbyist enthusiasts, but there was one ex-provincial level wushu athlete that came from the city Xi'an in the northwestern province. I think his name was Zhang Hu. So him and I competed in the traditional men's Xingyi division, and then the judges gave us the same score, so we shit first place. And he was really upset about that. He complained to the committee, to the judges. He said that he is a provincial level professional athlete. I'm just a random kid from nowhere. How on earth can he share first place with me? He made a big scene at the time. And then later on the day, I met him again with men's Baji form. And then, and he complained again. And eventually the judge gave me 0.1 point less than him. So he won gold and I won silver. Anyway, I'm not saying anything else here other than the fact that I did, go up against some so-called provincial level professional athlete from China, and they still did reasonably well. But I keep saying, these tournaments are not to be taken seriously. I'm not trying to prove my martial arts skill by how many medals and certificate I have. It's just to show you that I have been there and I've done that. And I have been intricately involved in the Chinese martial art community for many, many years. And not just some random guy who decided to do some self-taught kung fu stuff in the backyard. After the tournament in Orlando, while we were visiting a theme park called Splendid China in Orlando, we came across another Chinese random guy, and then he got talking with my dad and discovered that we were here for competition, that we are martial artists. He was really excited and he invited us to come to New York with him to open a Chinese martial arts school in Flushing, Queens. So we did that. We spent about 3 or 4 months living in New York. I was going to Flushing High over there, and then every day after school I'll come to the place that we rented, and we'll give public classes. And during that time, we've also got to interact with some other fellow Chinese martial art practitioners within the area. Most of them are not that exciting, except this one particular group of people that me and my dad met, who came from a martial organization called Wu Tang. Right, so if you might know, it's a Taiwanese organization formed by a very famous Baji grandmaster, Liu Yunqiao, back in Taiwan. So they have branches all around America. The one that's actually in Flushing, they weren't that great, but we managed to meet someone and his group of buddies who trained with another member of this organization all the way in Boston. Right? Apparently, I never met that master myself, but he was a really old master from what I hear. I was going to go and meet him at some point, but Boston was really kind of far away. Not that far, but kind of far for me and my dad to travel. So we didn't quite get to go there before we left America. And that's very interesting because they basically show us a version of Baji that's very different from anything that we've seen before. And that's what eventually led me to believe, not at the time, but later when I reflect upon this, led me to believe that Baji actually has internal qualities. Right? Basically, the Taiwanese version of Baji, unlike what I've ever came across from my dad or from others in China, so their version of Baji has 3 stages. The first stage is relaxed thinking force. Second stage is 4 directional force, they call it the cross force, and third is the spiral force. Right? That's very, very interesting because that correlates with understanding of other internal Chinese martial arts. And at the time, he showed me that the method of training is that they will do a very low stance pose from the form, and they will inhale, exhale 8 times without moving, and then slowly transition to the next pose, and then 8 breaths, and the next pose, and the whole form will essentially take them half an hour to almost an hour to do. And that also basically aligns with how internal martial art does stance training. So although Baji originally isn't internal martial art, but the way they do it is very similar to internal martial art. Again, I might talk about this in a separate video more in detail, but that's one of the interesting things that I was able to come across in New York. Now here's a picture I was taking in New York when we were visiting the United Nations building, I believe that was. And just out of interest sake, on my left hand side, I believe, was the World Trade Center. At the time, it was still there. And actually, I was in Manhattan during 9/11, where the World Trade Center was attacked by terrorists. I didn't physically see it. I was indoor at the time in a public hospital, waiting in line to take my vaccination so that I can go to school. But I did hear a massive sound. I did hear the sound of the plane flying through the building. And I did, first-handedly witness the panic and the hysteria that happened that was caused by the event afterward. Everyone was just going really crazy. Anyway, that's just some side notes that might be interesting. The time that I visited New York was actually the same time 9/11 happened. So eventually the reason we left New York was because, because of 9/11, they become even more strict when it comes to immigration laws, and there was just no way that my dad and I were able to apply for immigration at the time, and we decided to just not waste our time there. We don't want to become illegal immigrants like majority of other Chinese people living in New York. And we already have a green card in South Africa. We don't want to become illegal in America. So that's why after 3 months of consulting lawyers and stuff, we decided, what, let's just pack up and go home. And that's why after that we came back to South Africa. And once we came to South Africa, we basically, lucky only 3 months, so our school and everything didn't fall apart yet, and we just resumed back to regular activities as usual. And then as I get older, I still do competitions here and there, but I slowly also transitioned into more of a general. Various tournament asked me to help them judge the competitors. So over here you see a picture of me being a judge and handing out medals to fellow competitors. And also as I get older, my dad has more and more trust in me, so he no longer supervises the classes. A lot of times he's not even there. I'll basically just take the classes myself, right? So here is the picture of me teaching, our students. This comes from my family plum flower mantis form. And here's me teaching someone Yiquan's version of push hand. And after I took the class over from my dad, our students continued to win gold medals every year at various national level competitions, and many of which were again selected for national team. And in case you're wondering why I never took part in any fighting tournament, right? So here's the thing: in the Chinese traditional custom, those who teach, whether you're an instructor or an assistant instructor, you're not allowed to take part in fighting tournaments because then it's kind of the school's face on the line that is too much to risk. Now I don't really agree with this, but at the time my dad's calling the shots, so everyone have to do whatever he says. And later on, when I gradually took over from him, I started to train my own students to take part in those fighting tournaments. So naturally, it's kind of weird if I take part against my own students, which is why I just took a step back and focus on training my students rather than going to compete in those tournaments myself. Even though I've never really taken part in an official fighting tournament in South Africa, I do have plenty of fighting and sparring experience. Besides training my own students for those events, I also frequently challenge other martial art practitioners from other styles and schools. We've had friendly and unfriendly exchanges in South Africa with other schools, which eventually actually caused some problems, which is why my dad actually told me to not do that anymore. So eventually I just do challenges every time I go back to China against different people that I hear are good or decent at fighting. I'll go and pay them a visit and check out what they're all about. And these are pictures taken of my students and other martial arts enthusiasts after we had a 10-day training camp that we held in the Nanhua Temple. It's a Buddhist temple in South Africa. Every year we'll be holding martial art training camps in the Nanhua Temple in South Africa, where everyone is welcome and to join and learn our version of Chinese martial art. Not only my own students participate, there are also members from other schools that participate. Like in this picture, you can see there's Edwin Bona, one of my personal friends, and his student from a Chole Fat school that also joined in to learn mantis from me at the time. And here's a group photo taken after a seminar that I gave in another school. So this is to show that not only is my dad a prominent figure in the martial community, and that we do performance for politicians and I win competitions, but we also are pretty involved within the Chinese martial arts scene in South Africa at the time. And obviously, if I were to shoot videos back then, I'll have much better settings that'll probably please those superficial viewers that give me those comments. But unfortunately, that's all in the past. In this current day, I don't have a school like that, and I don't really go around schools anymore. So either you like the knowledge I'm sharing or just don't watch my videos. So now in case you're wondering, since my dad ran quite a successful martial arts school, we had a lot of students, we were doing similar with other schools, collaborations, what happened, why I end up teaching him in my backyard. Well, so here's the thing, my dad's very a sociable person. He enjoys socializing, so much so that he eventually left South Africa and went back to China because he has a better social connection there than in South Africa, right? He wasn't happy with the kind of social connection he has here, especially the fact that he can't speak English, and therefore he doesn't feel like he can do as much here than he can do in Beijing. So he went back to China. Now I'm the exact opposite of my dad. I'm not a very sociable person at all. I like to to shut up and train rather than hang out with those kind of people. So ever since he left, I just focus more and more on my personal training, and also the time he left, also the time where I started college. And graphic design is actually quite a hectic course, and I just didn't have time to hang out with other martial art schools, going to martial art meetings with federations and stuff. So I just basically took a step back and gradually just faded out of the scene. And once I started working as a graphic designer, I actually didn't want to teach martial art anymore, so I actually stopped doing it for a couple of years. It was only at a much later stage where I decided to pick this up again, and and after that, everything had to start from scratch, so to speak. And and even then, I can't really fully dedicate to teaching classes because I have my own training trip, three months out of the year, and then I work on warriors. Also other reasons why I had to leave the city for a couple of weeks. So it's just hard to keep a large group class because every time we get new students, so I leave for China for 3 months, I come back, the new student doesn't want to come back, right? It's very hard to keep and maintain a large group class when the instructor is constantly not here. Which is why eventually, as currently, I just work on teaching private lessons to certain individuals who value my teaching, and I basically stopped trying to do group class altogether. I just don't have the ability to do that. And of course, now with COVID-19, that's next to impossible. So lastly, but not the least, we're going to take a look at my own personal journey in martial arts seeking for true knowledge, which is the only thing that really matters to me and should to you too if you really care about Chinese traditional martial art. So everything that I've been talking about up to this point are merely formality, right? From here onwards, the content that I'm sharing are actually what defines me as a Chinese martial art practitioner in my own opinion. Everything else doesn't really matter.